Conversation's already started before you even joined us. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Bold.
Welcome. Hey, everybody. Glad to have you. Make sure to put your comments, questions here. We got a lot to talk about. There was a State of the Union. What did you think of State of the Union? President Trump's first State of the Union. It was the third longest one in the history of America.
And
the first two were Bill Clinton.
He said it was the highest rated. Is that true?
I'm pretty sure that it's actually true.
Oh, my God. It is so... Oh, my God. Here we start already. It is so not true. It wasn't even close. It was not close to the highest rated. You drink the Kool-Aid. What is it in your mug? Donald Trump did come out this week, and he said immediately, he tweeted after the State of the Union, it was the highest rated State of the Union in history, et cetera, immediately debunked by what we call facts. You know, I'm not sure if he's familiar with them. But
75% of Americans said that they liked it, that they agreed with the speech, that it was well done. And I got into a little bit of a Twitter dispute with my former Harvard Kennedy School professor, Nicholas Burns, because basically he was just saying how negative the speech was.
Drop.
And I was just like, are we listening to the same speech? Like,
well, but here's the, here's the thing.
He said, this president is divisive. He's not the president for all Americans. Like, I was just like, really?
Well, but you know what? So, but you have to bear in mind, because I had a similar conversation. Sorry, dry mouth. I had a similar conversation with someone, but my position was, it's not because he was divisive. It's because he was so unbelievable. And I think that while a lot of people probably agreed with the words that he said, the percentage of Americans who actually believed that he believed what he was saying was far, far lower. And that's because, you know, he talked about unity. He talked about unifying. He said all of the words that we'd expect any president to say. But unlike George W. Bush, who I think most people believed when he gave a speech would leave the room and attempt to be bipartisan, Donald Trump left the room and immediately began becoming partisan. And I think that the reason that people saw it as negative is because it's been very difficult for anyone to see past, to believe the president when he says he wants to be bipartisan. When he says these great things, it still sounds negative to a lot of people because they just know that he doesn't have any interest in being bipartisan and working together.
Well, and I think that was actually the beauty of what he did was, like, he owned, I mean, here's the problem why I couldn't vote for him in 2016, is that I didn't know if he was sufficiently conservative. But I think time after time after time, he's showing himself to be consistently conservative. And I think that's why a lot of people were like, okay, he's basically owning his bias. Like on this show,
see, that fascinates me. But see, that fascinates me because he wasn't conservative in this speech.
No, but he was, though.
No, he wasn't. I mean, it was so amazing to me to see Democrats sit like this, which we can talk about that another time because that was a thing.
Oh, yeah, Nancy
Pelosi. Democrats, well, it wasn't just her, and we can't, by all means, try to caricature something. No, but Democrats sat like this for an infrastructure proposal, and Republicans peed their seats with excitement over $1 trillion in infrastructure spending. That's not a conservative position. His positions on trade with other countries are not conservative positions, but Republicans were going crazy over it, and Democrats. So it wasn't really a conservative speech, and it was baffling to me to see Republicans cheering for things that they would never cheer for, even with any other president, and Democrats being willing to sit quietly for things that normally they'd be sort of excited about. And so, I mean, his immigration proposal has ticked off a lot of people on the right. I think it's funny to me to hear you say he's been consistently conservative.
Well, okay, so for example, he brought up Neil Gorsuch. That's the reason why a lot of people, conservatives, held their nose because they wanted a Supreme Court nominee who was going to be conservative. He brought that up. By the way, Neil Gorsuch looked hilarious. He had his like stone face when they
I would bring up one thing that I'd done too if it was all that I'd done. So good for him.
And then the tax reform plan, which is very exciting. Standing up to the North Koreans, and when he brought that guest who had the crutches, the guy who had defected from North Korea, I started tearing up a little bit because hearing his story of how he just, I mean, he was crippled and he was just, I mean, it was the human desire, the burning desire for freedom. And it was amazing. And to see what President Trump has done to stand up to the North Koreans, he's been able to bring the Chinese to the table to sanction the North Koreans in ways that no president has done successfully. He's gotten the UN to pass sanctions against the North Koreans, and unlike anything President Obama or President Clinton or President George
someone came with their talking points this morning. I mean,
somebody came with facts.
No, I don't think so. But because the truth is, the president president did get the Koreans to talk, if for no other reason than the fact that they realized, well, the U.S. isn't going to lead on this because he's not leading, so I guess we should get involved. And if you want to say that his behavior and his erratic behavior, which scared Kim Jong-un into talking to South Korea, was because he was terrified of Trump doing something nuts, okay, you can give him credit for that. And I will give him credit for the stories that he told in the balcony with those folks who were with the First Lady. They were moving. They were powerful. They did what they were supposed to do. They moved people in the way they were supposed to move them. But every single president does that, and to imply that what he did was better than what Barack Obama did is short-sighted and unfair.
Well,
and it's bottom line, it's short-sighted and unfair, and I'm not sure that I'm ready to give kudos to someone for doing something that everybody else does, as if though it was something groundbreaking.
Look, I do agree President Obama was very good at that as well. What I'm saying is that for the people who are saying that Trump is somehow this aberration, this freak that we shouldn't respect, he's the president and we need to give him that respect. That's my point. Let's move on and talk very quickly about the response, because I know you and I had a conversation and I had a little spat. Can we put the tweets up of, so I said something, so Congressman Joe Kennedy III, who I have debated before in person, we had a conversation on Twitter with Lawrence O'Donnell, who's a host on MSNBC. So my take on Joe Kennedy's response was that it was way, way, way too hard left. So you can see my tweet where I basically said, even Lawrence O'Donnell from MSNBC calls out Joe Kennedy for being too hard left. If that's the 2020 game plan for Democrats, they're toast and Trump is going to win again.
But Lawrence
responded. Put his tweet up. So Lawrence O'Donnell, he says, no, not true. I was asked to compare and contrast him with his grandfather, but I did call out Trump for lying that he will cut prescription drug prices and the Republicans who applauded that lie. We got the clip, actually, of Lawrence O'Donnell. Let's play that, and we'll let you all decide. What do you think?
Lawrence O'Donnell, having just written yourself about 1968 and extensively about Bobby Kennedy, seeing Congressman Kennedy there give that speech, what was your reaction?
There were a couple of notes his grandfather would have struck differently, and because speaking to a national audience like this, Bobby Kennedy would always take note of his own law and order credentials as a former attorney general. And so he would not have spoken as strictly left as these talking points did all the way through. Probably, for example, on the mention of the wall, probably would not have gone to the point of, if that wall is built, we will tear it down. Probably would have, I'm talking about some very fine edits here and there that just would have pulled it a little bit toward that centrist direction. But this is where the Democratic Party is tonight. I don't think you're going to find any Democrats who have anything in this speech that they want to take issue with.
You know what? I'm surprised that you wanted to play that. I had not seen what he said. I'm surprised you wanted to play that because it totally proves his tweet response to you right. He was asked to compare him to Bobby Kennedy. Every line that came out of his mouth was, Bobby Kennedy would have done it this way. He probably would have done it differently. Bobby Kennedy would have pulled it less to the left. I mean, whether you want to agree with whether you believe that Joe Kennedy was too far left or not, that's not what Lawrence O'Donnell was saying. He didn't say he thought he was too far left. He said he thought that Bobby Kennedy would not have been as far left. You both can be right in this scenario, but his response to you was accurate.
Well, the thing is, this is an ink block test, because the phrase that got me at the end was where he said, I don't think you'll find a Democrat here tonight who would disagree with what Joe Kennedy said. Therein lies the problem for the Democratic Party in 2020, because you're not realizing the country is not so far left. So the country is actually in a more centrist place.
Well, let's bring in our guests to talk about it. Nicole Goodkind's here with us. Again, politics reporter for Newsweek. And Alexandra DeSanctis is with us again, one of our faves from the National Review Institute. You're right. The Democratic Party is very far left. The base is very far left. The base of the Republican Party is just as far right. And I don't think that many people would disagree with that. What do you think? Alexandra, we'll throw that to you first. Is it not true that the bases of both parties are really sort of at the extremes?
Maybe, but I don't think the base of the Republican Party is the same thing as Trump's base. I think the Republican Party largely is still more, traditionally conservative, and there's just this kind of chunk that's very vocal right now because of Trump that supports a kind of Trumpian brand of republicanism, which is not the whole party.
Does that not, though, kind of still give, because I agree with that, doesn't it still give the Republicans the same challenge that Kerry's saying the Democrats have, which I don't necessarily disagree with, that the Democrat base may potentially pull any future Democrat nominee further to the left than might be helpful, and at the same time, that Republican base pulled the Republican nominee so far to the right or so far to the extreme that they ended up with a far more controversial candidate?
Yeah, I mean, I want to point out that Hillary Clinton was pretty centrist as far as policy goes. I don't think she was very far left at all, but you saw Bernie Sanders, who was, not even a Democrat, right? He was as far left as you can really be. He had a big base. He had a great following. So it's not necessarily a bad idea for the Democratic Party to move to the left. And I also want to point out that Joe Kennedy's not running for president. He has some senatorial ambitions in the future, but this isn't where he's going, and I don't think he needs to represent all Democrats right now. That was something, Lawrence O'Donnell said, not something that he said himself.
True, although Clay and I were talking, who knows? Anything could happen. He might run. Who knows at this point? I think it would be a mistake to nominate him because he is so establishment. I mean, the brand itself is incredibly, people were posting pictures on Twitter of Joe Kennedy's house. It's an enormous mansion, and he has a large wall behind it.
Trump, of course, shits in a golden toilet.
Will he tear it down?
Right.
That doesn't quite matter. I mean, he's 37 years old. He's got time. As much as I disagree with you about his ability to appeal to working class voters, he's still too young to do it. Who knows whether Elizabeth, I think he's probably banking on Elizabeth Warren hopefully ascending, and therefore he can take that seat. But is there anybody, do you think, I mean, we're way far out. You know what, let's not do that. Let's talk more about drive me crazy. Let's talk more about the State of the Union. This argument about whether or not Trump was actually trying to reach out to the left, whether the left embraced it, whether they believed it. How would you score the way both of you, how he performed at the State of the Union?
Yeah, I think on performance, he was fine. He read from the prompter, right? There are two Trumps. There's the kind of bored, I'm reading from the prompter, listless Trump, and then there's the rally Trump that really fires up his base. This was more of the bored, listless Trump. In terms of what he said, I think that there was the fact check was there was a mistake or an exaggeration every 4.5 minutes. So I think people saw through that. People rated the speech just fine, but can you remember anything that Barack Obama said in his speeches? I don't think it really makes a difference in the long run. We saw the next day, Republicans were trying to outline their 2018 plan, and all anyone could talk about was the latest controversy with Trump, which is the memo. So I think in the long run, what he said in the State of the Union, first of all, nothing was that significant, and second of all, it won't stick.
Are there people in the middle of the country, not geographically but politically, are there people in that moderate middle who you think might have seen his performance at the State of the Union and thought, okay, wait a second, he's actually trying to reach out to the...
Oh, I absolutely do. I mean, the CBS poll the next day found that 72% of independents approved of the speech. 80% of people thought it was unifying. That's a big deal. I mean, yeah, people don't really remember the State of the Union. It's not given because everyone's going to remember it and love the president a year later because of it. That's not the point of the State of the Union. But I think for someone like Trump, who has such a low approval rating just 1 year into the presidency, I think it's a big deal to be able to give a unifying speech that appeals to people in the middle. Even 43% of Democrats said they approved of it. Like, for a party that's supposedly so anti-Trump, that's a big deal.
Carrie, don't you think that he can shoot himself in the foot, though? I mean, if he's got great poll numbers after a speech, and then he comes out the next day and says things on Twitter that are not uniquely, very much disunifying, does that not just hurt? Is he not hurting himself?
Well, I think that's been my problem all of last year, was that he would do something great on the policy front, and then he would get into a Twitter fight. And the thing is, Twitter is a very important tool for the president, and I'm not saying he shouldn't tweet. I think that, yes, though, sometimes he can get in his own way of his own momentum because of the tweets, because it ends up coming across as angry. And so if he could use Twitter in a way, and I'm fine with him using Twitter to respond to attacks, but what bothers me is that sometimes proactively, it's basically an unforced error, like they say in tennis, like no one's forcing you to mess up, and he just does it. And that bothers me because he has done so many great things on the policy front. Let's pull in just a few viewer comments here. Kim Studer-Massel says, it appears based on the Democrats' demeanor Tuesday night that they are not interested in being bipartisan or working together. Their behavior was disgraceful. And then Emily Muhick-Patrick says, I just couldn't stand to watch the State of the Union this year. And Janet Marie Verselli says, Clay could see through all the BS.
Yeah, Janet. I mean, I think a lot of people could, but to Kim's remark, did the Democrats hurt themselves at all? I mean, I think I understand. I sat there as a progressive, sort of a few times thinking, yeah, there are a few things you probably could have clapped for that you didn't. They made a decision probably to appease their base of support to sort of defy and cross their arms. Did that hurt them any, do you think, the optics of that?
I think that Democrats have been trying to be this unifying party for so long, and they try to give to the Republican Party, and it ends up hurting them, right? They kind of are the parents right now of democracy, and it's not helping them. I think that they need to have a unified front against Trump if they're going to get anywhere in 2018 and in 2020. Does
it not play into his whole game, though, that he's trying to show people are all, the media's against me, the Democrats are against me? I kind of tend to agree that, at some point you just got to say, screw it. But does it not play into what he wants?
And so, okay, I'm not putting you on the spot for Newsweek, but as a former Newsweek intern myself, I've been pretty disappointed by some Newsweek headlines that I've seen. So, like, they compared him to the mass murderer Charles Manson, and that story was taken down because people were like, wow, this is the president of the United States. Like, a mainstream publication like Newsweek should not be doing this. This is something you might see from, like, an alt weekly. And then a couple other headlines that, I'm just like, wow, this is Newsweek. It should be mainstream. But it seems like so many mainstream journalists have it out for the president. And you see Brian Ross at ABC News, who's basically been completely demoted and can't even report about Trump anymore because he has such a lens to be so anti-Trump. Do you think that's a problem with some journalists where they see it as their holy war mission to take down Trump, and it ends up having the backfiring effect of making Trump supporters love him even more?
Well, I mean, as a Newsweek journalist, I can say that I write about Trump when he does something, that is wrong. And I also write about things that he does right. So I don't think that's necessarily the problem. I just think when you look at his record and his tweets, there's generally more bad things to write than good things. And you do point to some of his policy that you agree with that you think is typically conservative, but there's no real indication that he's the one behind that policy writing it, right? It seems like the immigration plan was Stephen Miller, not Trump, right? It has him all over it. So I understand what you're saying, but I do think that we are just trying to cover something that's really abnormal the best we can.
Do you, Alexandra, do you think that he'll get a bump in his approval rating after this?
I do think so. I think we've already seen it in a couple of polls.
Approval rating bumps?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think you'll get anything passed as a result?
I don't know if it'll stay. I think the immigration plan in particular, again, from that CBS poll I cited earlier, most people liked his immigration plan. That was surprising to me because we hear this whole you talk about biased journalism, we hear about how everybody hates his immigration plan and he's such a bigot and he hates immigrants, whatever. That's not really true. Most people line up with what the Trump administration wants to do on immigration. And that's, I think, the big thing they're going to focus on this year in terms of policy. To me, the State of the Union was very thin on policy, and the specifics were really just on immigration. So for the people to approve of what he said on that, I think is a big deal.
I just want to point out that I reached out to the White House about the infrastructure plan that was supposed to happen last year, and it's still being pushed back. So I don't know what's going to happen in terms of policy. All I know is that we keep having these distractions, these gossipy distractions that take away from any real policy for the Republicans.
Well, the reality TV presidency.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Well, Nicole, keep doing that good journalism. Yes.
Nicole and Alexandra, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you.
There is something to be said, I think, for headlines being, and I'm not saying it's right, but for headlines that are written for clicks more than anything else. And I'm not condoning that particular practice, but I think that there certainly are times that headlines are written more for clicks on the internet than they are to tell the story. And unfortunately, a lot of Americans don't read the article, they just read the headline.
Oh, yeah. No, that's one of my a friend of mine said, journalism these days is going to headline writing school, not actual journalism school.
And then you have to write headlines like the New York Post has always written headlines, something crazy that'll get people's attention.
And I don't know what the answer is, if this is just a phase or if this is the new normal. I don't know.
Well, something else that got people's attention this week, which was sort of a surprise to a lot of folks. Amazon, JP Morgan Chase, and Berkshire Hathaway all sort of announced a plan to do what they're going to start their own healthcare.
A joint healthcare organization. They said that the fundamentals were not going to be driven by profit, which is interesting. It makes me think that this is going to be some sort of nonprofit or B Corp or some sort of model where they don't have to respond to the signals of the marketplace, which is very interesting because that's problematic for me. However, these are great brands. So if these great minds are going at it, I hope good things will happen.
Let's bring in my girl. Let's bring in my girl, Alicé, Anil, filmmaker.
Thank you, Clay.
There you go. Come on now. And Manhattan Institute's Chris Pope is with us on Skype. Hey, Chris.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Thank you very much. So this idea, we'll start with you, Chris, this idea that they are starting it's not a nonprofit healthcare company, but it's certainly a healthcare company where they are trying to not base their policies on making a profit and fleecing people. Do you think it'll have the ability to disrupt the market in the way that I imagine they're trying to do?
Well, nonprofit is a funny word in healthcare. It's sort of like profit in air quotes. Pretty much every hospital or most hospitals in the country are a nonprofit, and that's really mostly for tax status reasons. It might be that that's the reason why they're calling this a nonprofit, if that's what they do. What is it that they might be able to achieve? Well, I think most Americans get their healthcare from their employers, and Amazon certainly employ a lot of people, and as do Berkshire Hathaway and JP Morgan. So the question is whether they might be able to broaden that out and start with their own employer base. There are a lot of regulations that make it easier for employers to deliver healthcare in innovative ways, and then to let other people come on board with what they develop. But it's definitely an ambitious thing, and it's not like they're the first people who've tried to reduce healthcare costs.
So, Chris, why do you think that when they made this announcement, there was just evaporated basically a lot of healthcare value on the exchanges on the publicly traded healthcare companies? A lot of them tanked after this announcement. Are they feeling pressure?
Well, the immediate thing might be that some of them might have contracts with Amazon and Berkshire Hathaway for their employees. So they might just immediately be losing some business. That could be the first thing. Secondly, there's actually the fact that there are some parts of healthcare where Amazon can immediately have an impact. Mail order pharmacy is a pretty obvious one. There are a lot of the fat in the system currently on prescription drugs is you go to a pharmacist, and certainly for generics, which are most of the drugs that Americans consume, a lot of the money is actually just going to the pharmacist rather than the drug maker. So if Amazon cuts those out of delivery from prescription drugs, there's certainly a way in which that could immediately lead to those savings. But most of the healthcare spending is on hospitals and physicians, and so the question of whether they can really cut out the fat in that part of the healthcare system is a much bigger and more important question.
Well, Chris, I'm going to give you major props for being able to convince some people that most healthcare companies are nonprofit, because I don't necessarily believe that they behave in such a way. And I am just going to sit back and let Alicé take this one because I really don't even feel like I need to ask you a question about this. But I will say, do you think, I'll ask you the same question that she asked Chris. Do you think other health companies are afraid that the sheets being ripped off of them with a move like this?
There's definitely a certain threat considering the enormity of the players involved. You know, you have, I think collectively they employ almost 1 million people. I also, and before I answer that, because I literally took a screenshot of this because it was the response of the Democratic Socialists of America. It was their immediate guttural response when they heard about this. And some of it I have a problem with, but immediately I kind of agree with what they said. And they said, and I quote, "We can do better than a healthcare system run by a rent seeker, a slumlord, and a Wall Street bank. It's called Medicare for all."
Yeah, but so my cell phone. Well, I probably shouldn't promote a product until they pay Karen for it. But there are Google has, for example,
yes,
done a lot of work in certain supplemental, I guess, industries outside of their main thing to try to disrupt the market. They came out, I think, with a cell phone plan that is that cut rates, et cetera. And a lot of people argue that they weren't looking for profit for that. They were doing it specifically because they wanted to force the other companies to do it. T-Mobile, I think, is starting a television cable plan. They say to do the same thing. They're going to charge less and serve in a different way, and it'll force other cable companies to do the same thing. Is it possible that Amazon and these companies are doing it in a way to force these other healthcare companies to stop gouging in the way that a lot of people believe they are?
I mean, I think so. I also think that if you look at, we're talking about the difficulty in talking about this is that we don't really know anything about it, right? They just made the announcement. There are no details. But even if you look at Amazon's model, for example, they didn't start out putting the profit motive at, the centerfold of the company. That actually gradually, they had a much longer term strategy.
It's still not profitable,
yes,
right?
Exactly. I mean, they had a much longer term strategy
20 years
of
out.
Basically disrupting a number of industries, and now they're taking over, now it's Whole Foods, now they're going into healthcare. So I think when they talk about it's not a profit motive, that immediately that's not the goal, but ultimately we don't know. And of course it can have this ripple effect that we're seeing in the stock value of a number of companies. But at the end of the day, for me, if you have such huge players stepping in, it's more of a symptom of how, number one, there's a vacuum created in this industry, and it's just a symptom of how problematic healthcare has become in this country. Initially, of course, I'm a supporter of Medicare for all, but in the immediate term, if you can have, 3 of the biggest players attempt to do something about it, this is why I had a problem with the very reactionary reaction of the Democratic Socialists. But at the end of the day, it is a symptom of the need for Medicare for all, and for not just providing an effective solution for the employees of these 3 big companies, but also remembering that, 45,000 Americans last year died because they couldn't get health care coverage in the richest country in the world. So for me, it's still a very moral issue that shouldn't be driven by a profit motive.
Well, okay. Surprisingly, I disagree with Medicare for all.
I'm shocked.
Because, shocking, Alicé. Even though I love you, girl.
Did you hear my eyes?
Only because when you see countries that have implemented broad government control of healthcare, like the UK or Canada, you've got waiting lists. You've got people who are waiting, like the Wall Street Journal, other press reports, people who are waiting 6 months or more, and the wait times are much longer than they are here in the United States to see a specialist, to even get a referral to get on the waiting list to see the specialist. I mean, there is rationing that is happening in these countries that have embraced a Medicare for all model. So I personally am very excited to see what this conglomerate or this affiliation will come up with, simply because I'm obsessed with Amazon. I use Amazon for everything. I think you mentioned Whole Foods. We had someone on our Bold Business show from an organization called Conscious Capitalism, which I'm a big fan of, which was founded by John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods. And the whole concept of conscious capitalism is based on companies that are here to create value for society, and that profit is a byproduct of that.
Right, so but how do you feel about I was going to just cut you out right there. How do you feel about the fact that the richest man in the history of the earth, Jeff Bezos, who's worth about $90 billion.
One of the second people, one of the other ones.
Exactly. He has employees that are living on food stamps. I think that, and when you talk about conscious capitalism, I think that is just a symptom of a fundamentally dysfunctional and morally bankrupt system. That the richest man on earth has people working for him that live on food stamps.
Stop us from going down a rabbit hole, because we should have.
Yes.
We love having you back.
More
we'll
about
bring you back. But
stamps.
I want to ask Chris though. So I get the sense that you don't think this is really going to have too big an impact on the healthcare system in general. Do you think it's going to have an impact on small business owners and the way that they are able to provide healthcare to their employees? You talked about we certainly know most people get their healthcare from their employer, but does these huge employers, them providing their own healthcare in this way, is it going to have an effect on small business owners and how they do that for their employees?
So one of the big policy changes over the past 6 months has been the executive order from the president in October that was going to open up association health plans, which was essentially allowing small businesses to provide the same type of health insurance that large businesses have been able to provide really for the past 40 years or so. This Amazon announcement really potentially allows that to be much more possible in practice. traditionally large businesses have been exempt from a lot of state regulations and taxes on health insurance, which has made it a lot harder for small businesses than large businesses to provide healthcare. And so the ability of small businesses to benefit from the same rules that large businesses have really opens the door for a large business like Amazon that takes smaller businesses under its wing, or at least the employees of smaller businesses, and allow them to benefit from the same kind of delivery innovations.
Well, I think, Alicé, you're right, is that we won't really know how it's going to affect anyone until we really know exactly what it is that they're doing. And it's a huge announcement. Anything that Amazon does these days is a big news story. But until we kind of understand whether they're just going to do it with their companies, whether they're going to actually start selling healthcare themselves, we really won't know how it'll affect it. But Chris, Pope, and Alicé, Anil, when we do know, please, both of you, come back and let's analyze it even further. Thank you both very much.
Thank you for having me.
That went in a different direction. People were excited about that I didn't think would be excited about it. People were not, and it's very confusing. We're not sure. I kind of believe that my prediction is that Amazon will test it out with its own folks and then eventually try to.
No, I think that will
themselves.
be, I agree. I think that they're going to test it. I mean, that's what they do with all their new ventures, whether it's, and I have to say, as much as I love Amazon, I do not love the Amazon food delivery or the instant delivery, Amazon Instant. It's terrible. It doesn't show up instantly.
Mine gets
They're
there
still
right on
working
time.
those bugs out. So,
Prom now,
but I have faith. Maybe I need. Well, I've been boycotting it for about.
Well, then listen.
a year and a half.
Amazon was able to, and this is a capitalist argument for you. Amazon was able to lower the prices of a whole bunch of products because they cut out the middleman, et cetera. If they're able to, we won't get into the argument about what it did to mom and pop businesses and brick and mortar, but if they're able to lower the prices of healthcare, then I think that a lot of people would be in favor of that. Everyone would be in favor of that, and hopefully a stopgap measure until we can get Medicare for all.
Well, not that. I disagree with that part. However, I did, as far as the Amazon and its ability to make things accessible and affordable, I'm excited about this possibility because I've spent time on exchange plans. And they're very complicated to navigate. They are not Amazon-esque.
Let's see if they can simplify it.
The ease with which you can just click and buy something on Amazon, that gives me hope as far as what Amazon might be able to do to disrupt the market, to create basically what you see with like an Orbitz or Kayak, where you can just literally at the click of a button.
Where you have to buy your healthcare before you know exactly what it's going to be like on Priceline. I want to change the subject though, because we're running behind. Because I want to dig a little bit more into the immigration thing. We talked about it with the State of the Union some, and this proposal that the president put forward. We haven't been able to talk about it too much yet. We've seen a sort of a compromise, I guess, in a way, and it's made. Listen, the way I see it is, if you make people on both sides really pissed, then you're probably somewhere in the middle and you're doing something right. He's certainly upset the Democrats with certain parts of it, and he's. Whether they'll get on board or not, I don't know. He's certainly upset a lot of people on the right.
Breitbart
as well.
has had a meltdown when the president released his immigration plan. So,
but if
Breitbart and the far left are both
then
melting,
you might end up being in the middle. We'll see. One of the biggest things that that he conceded, I think, which surprised me especially, and I think has put Democrats in an interesting spot, is that Democrats were asking for 900,000 Dreamers to be protected, and the president came back and offered 1.8 million Dreamers being protected. He doubled it, which kind of puts folks in a spot. So we want to talk about that with our next guest, actor Bambadjan Bamba. He's actually going to be in an upcoming Marvel film, Black Panther, and he is a Dreamer, but he's joining us on Skype today. Bambadjan, thanks so much for joining us.
How's it going, guys? Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, great to have you.
So we're sitting here talking about this proposal for immigration plan that the president put forward, and he offered to protect twice the number of Dreamers that Democrats had asked for him to protect. Certainly, it ends up he moves really far to the right on some of the other positions, but is it worth it, do you think, to protect more Dreamers, to give away some of those other things, for liberals to give away some of those other things in order to protect twice the number of folks?
Look, I definitely think the pathway to citizenship, I mean, that's something we've all been fighting for a long time. That's exactly what Dreamers need and want, to have security. But at the same time, do we want to have that in exchange for our families being torn apart, our communities being militarized, people being incarcerated. It just seems like it's a complete change of even the immigration system at the expense of dreamers. So that's the challenging part. I definitely understand that there has to be some kind of meeting in the middle to come up with a deal that's going to work for everyone. But I don't know about this deal yet.
Well, no, and it's certainly, I mean, that's what politics is this, the economic phrase is that economics is the dismal science. That at the end of the day, politics and economics, it's a very difficult choice. I mean, that was the name of Hillary Clinton's book, was Hard Choices. So I think that's what the president was trying to propose, something that would be kind of this middle ground. But Bambadjan, we want to play a video that you moved to the South Bronx with your family when you were 10 years old from the Ivory Coast. Let's cue up this video and show a little bit about your story, your immigration story.
My name is Bambadjan Bamba. I'm an actor, filmmaker. I got an awesome opportunity to work on Marvel's Black Panther. Hollywood movies have gone into the world and made everybody believe that America is the greatest place in the world.
So, great opportunity. So you came out on CNN.com. You wrote an op-ed talking about how you were a DACA recipient. We won't get into your specific case, but I do want to talk about, you know, what has that been like for you? What kind of response have you gotten since you wrote that CNN op-ed?
Well, I mean, honestly, ever since there was an LA Times article on the 29th of November, I believe, where I announced my status. Ever since then, it's just been, you know, I've been on a lot of platforms sharing my story and trying to humanize this very political issue. So the response has been great as far as, you know, family and friends that I know in the community. But our goal, or my goal, was to get Hollywood to put more skin in the game, to get more Hollywood, to get Hollywood to take more concrete actions to help immigrants, like other industries, like the tech industry and all of that. And we all know the power of media, the power of storytelling, and breaking all the stereotypes, especially the negative ones, about immigrants.
Sure. Well, and Bambadjan, can I ask you a question though? Because I mean, you're going to be in Black Panther. That's probably going to be a very successful film.
Yes.
You have a talent, that you have this extraordinary acting ability, but people would say, well, okay, that's the type of immigrant that we want. We want a high-skilled immigrant. We want someone who's going to be contributing to American society. And you look at the statistics of, for example, the National Academy of Sciences found that 58% of immigrants with children are taking some form of American welfare. And that's my interpretation of what the president is trying to do, is to say we want more immigrants who are going to be adding, rather than taking money from the middle class or lower class taxpayers who are paying into the system, to give to immigrants who are going to be taking more than they're putting in.
Well, that's the thing, right? There's definitely a lot of different statistics out there. I mean, I don't know about that one specifically, but I do know that it's found historically, and it's a fact, that immigrants help America. Immigrants will help the economy, will boost the economy, and that's been proven over and over. And also, people don't know that immigrants pay taxes. Like I pay taxes. Immigrants pay $12 billion in Social Security, $12 billion in regular taxes. Dreamers, I mean, you know, we have to pay $500 to get DACA, and we've been paying taxes ever since. It's not to mention
the sales taxes and the amount of money that they put into the economy, because they're buying from businesses. And I used to tell people on the trail, see what happens when you take all the immigrants out of this area, and how many people you'll lose shopping at your stores, etc. But so you're very versed on this, and I imagine that it's because it's something you're passionate about. It's personal to you, but it probably has a little to do also with the fact that you're an ambassador for Define American. So Define American obviously works to educate people on these issues. Tell us more about that organization and why you felt that it was the one to kind of bring this message about dreamers.
Right. So when the administration decided they wanted to cancel DACA, that's when I finally thought, look, I have to do something. I have to share my story. I have to use this platform that has been given by God to help make a difference. And thank God, you know, Black Panther's coming out and I'm in the good place, and all those things can help amplify this message. So I searched around and I saw that Define America had a specific portal where hundreds of people are sharing their story and helping people understand and humanize, again, DACA recipients, because no one really knows until you meet someone face to face, until, you know, they tell you their story. Like me, you know, I came, like you said, the South Bronx. I didn't speak any English. I learned English watching TV, loving hip hop, and went to high school, middle school, wanted to be an actor. And then I got into acting school, and now I'm an actor. And that's the American dream. That's the American story. And with Define America, they've just been instrumental in helping me put the story out and helping, again, like shift the conversation and the stereotypes, especially in the media, regarding who immigrants really are and what the facts really are. Because it's very controversial, but people really don't know much about immigrants, about the process, about our contribution to this great nation.
Well, I appreciate that you're doing it. I've always said, and I think Carrie has agreed too, that personalizing some of these messages and making sure people understand that they affect humans, affect real people, and affect them in you know, really dramatic ways is really an answer to trying to change people's minds on it. So keep up the good work. We appreciate it. Come back and talk to us at any time. Bambadjan Bamba, thanks so much.
Would love to. If I can add just something, I have faith. I have a lot of faith that everything's going to work out for good as far as immigrants are concerned. I'm grateful that the conversation is happening on the Hill right now. I'm grateful that this conversation has been put forward, and it really puts a mirror to America's face. Like, what country are we really, or what country are we going to become? Like, are we a country that turns, you know, young people away who are aspiring and who are giving back to the community? Or are we a country that receives them and protects them and protects communities and protects families? So I think that's what's on the line right now. Thanks again.
We all have, I have a lot of hope as well. Thank you so much, Bambadjan.
And I hope your dog is doing well.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, my dog got a little sick this morning on me, but he's doing fine. He's doing fine. It's a tricky issue. You said this hard choices thing, people having to learn to compromise. And I will say that, or make the choice to do that. And I will say it'll be very interesting to see whether the right and the left are able to come together to make some sort of compromise on this. I have hope that in the long run things will work out. In the short term, I'm not 100% sure as to whether or not it's going to end up being this particular thing will pass, because a lot of folks are just not willing on the right and the left to come together and talk to each other. So that's why we're going to bring our next guest on. How'd you like that transition?
That was beautiful.
Laura Messing, I'm not supposed to bang on the desk, sorry about that. Laura Messing and Roger Sachar they're co-founders of an organization called Experiment in Dialogue, which brings people from both sides of the aisles together, both sides of the political spectrum together, and tries to get them to talk. You do dinners, you host events to get folks together. I honestly think you are brave souls for trying to get some folks in the room who disagree. How difficult has that been? Tell us why you started it and how difficult it's been to do that.
Yeah, great. So the idea, I started thinking about the idea post-election, of course. And full disclosure, I was studying conflict resolution and mediation up at Columbia. And I was modeling all of these textbook examples of what humans do in conflict that's bad, right? Of course, we oversimplify the situation. We hyper-stereotype people that we see that we don't agree with. And we see others that as static representations of parties or groups or ideologies that we don't associate with. We see ourselves, of course, as these multidisciplinary, complex people that are capable of complex thought. But them, no, they are this and that is bad.
That's how I think about Carrie.
That's how a lot of people think about Trump, where he is just pure evil.
Yeah.
And they allow no shades of
Good Lord, get off your soapbox. We're having fun here.
Sorry,
Jesus
I can't help it. It happens. I just got screamed at in the MSNBC green room. I have never been screamed at in 4 years of doing online or
We need her to
cable
conflict
TV.
resolve right now.
No, I know, but like, so this is what I want to know.
Yeah.
Is this actually working? Because as a conservative who is giving Trump a chance, how are these dinners going? Like, how does it work?
Well, it's this idea that you're getting at, which is the idea of legitimacy. If you don't believe that the other side is a legitimate person with legitimate points and legitimate concerns, there's no reason to engage with them. And if there's no reason to engage with them, then you never have any compromise.
So how do you get there?
Yes.
Well, so one of the things we do is when we first sit down, we have a set of rules where you're not going to be
Group
rude.
agreements.
I'm sorry.
Come on.
Group agreements.
Group agreements.
That came out of the textbook too, right?
She does not like rules. Love rules. We have a set of group agreements where we're going to respect each other. We may not agree with each other, but we're going to adopt tones of respect. We tend to steer away from talking about directly on political issues, and we try to get to know the people behind the stories of the people who are sitting there first. That's our first goal.
Right.
Once you do that, once you can humanize the other side, then you realize that a lot of times they aren't even the other side. There's shared concerns. So, and this isn't one I share, but oftentimes we have people from both sides who are mothers, and they start talking about their kids and their experiences. And look, there's a lot more concern with being a mother in New York City than caring about what went on during the State of the Union. And so it's these ties can bind us in ways that politics tends to divide us.
Yeah.
So how do you find your participants? Because I would imagine is it voluntary, or are you out there going out and
dragging people,
screaming? Because I have developed a belief in the past year and a half that people don't want to even attempt to agree, that we find it so much safer to stay on our side and listen to Fox News if we're on the right and MSNBC if we're on the left and not get involved in that whole debate and fight. How do you get people in? And if it's volunteer-based, aren't you really just getting a group of folks who are already halfway there?
Yeah, so great question. I'm going to break it up into two. The first part, the first part, how do we get people there? And people are most comfortable with those that are within their political bubble, who they see every day. So we've had huge success with word of mouth, right? I think the thing that distinguishes Experiment and Dialogue, because there are other movements across the country doing a very similar thing, the thing that makes us different, however, is that our board is comprised of both sides. We have, I am on the left, Roger is on the right, and our third board member is also.
the rules and the no rules.
And our third member is also on the right. So we're three people, and I talk to folks that I know. I'm like, this is a really great idea. Here's why. They're like, great, I'm on board. Roger and Ali talk to people that they know, and they sell it however, with authenticity, because we all truly believe, if there's one thing we can believe in, it's the importance and power of humanizing each other.
So here's my question. We're here in New York. You went to Columbia. This itself is a socioeconomic bubble.
Sure.
In terms of the zip codes we inhabit, where we shoot our show. How do you guys go outside even just the urban bubble, and where are you guys? Walk us through actually more of like what exactly your organization is, and are you looking outside of the top 20 percentile of income or education levels? Because that's where a lot of the issue here was with Trump, was that it was people who are in the bottom 80%.
Yeah, and so that's something we talk about a lot, and we talk about that during our strategic planning meetings. Right now, admittedly, we are, for the most part, getting low-hanging fruit. It's a self-selecting group of people who are intrigued by the idea, who are open to this type of dialogue. We've been around since April was our first dinner. We've had our fourth dinner was just this week. Our fifth dinner will be next month on the 21st.
How big? How many people?
So we started with 8 people. We have 10, and February we'll have 12. We're feeling out that size. I think we've hit a sweet spot with 10. They're always balanced. There's a quick survey that all participants fill out so that it's not public information, but it's so that I know who's at the table and make sure that the small groups that we break out to are balanced, as well as the dinner as a whole. So back to your question of how do we get the vast majority of people who might not be interested initially in this idea, that's what we're working towards. We're gaining leverage and momentum. We used to have dinners every 3 months because of demand. Now we're having 2 dinners in 2 months back to back. We're forming more partnerships throughout the community.
We're spreading outside of the area also?
Outside of the New York City area, not yet, but
well, you're beta testing.
Yeah, exactly, and hence the name, right? I mean, this whole idea was like, I don't know what will happen. It's an experiment. Who knows? This could be a terrible idea.
So have any of the dinners gone awry? Like, what's been the most unexpected thing you've seen at the dinners?
We did have one in my backyard that I ended up having. I spent the whole time barbecuing, which was, I live in New York City and have a backyard, so I'm immensely popular. We haven't really had anything go awry. We haven't had anybody, try to deck someone or anything like that. And in fact, the most surprising thing is how well they've gone.
Too well.
How right? It's everybody ends up leaving at least. Maybe they're not getting a beer afterwards, but with at least acquaintances on the other side who they like and respect.
And to that point, one of the new initiatives that we're beta testing right now is this idea of a buddy system. So I consider myself
sponsor.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. I think the rapport that the 3 of us have developed over this year, working together on this shared project, has really deepened our understanding of the other side. And I want to make sure that our participants have that opportunity to do that as well. And so we, in our survey on Wednesday night, we asked people if they'd be interested in forming an alliance with a buddy from the other side of the aisle. And you can do anything with that. It could be like a monthly coffee date, a phone call, or even, finding
texting during the State of the Union.
You joke, but absolutely, that's what we're talking
about. We're buddies by that definition. So do you think part of the problem, though, that you guys seem to be addressing is that a lot of this is happening anonymously on Twitter or social media, where you don't have that interfacing, where you're physically in the room? I can touch Clay. Right. Maybe that's a hostile work environment. No, but I think it's a lot harder. In fact, I read about this study where it was done actually a while ago, a long time ago, when we had Jim Crow laws, and what they did was they were actually targeting Asian Americans, where you couldn't. It was seeing whether hotels would serve an Asian American, and a lot of them in person. So what they did was they sent Asians to go to, I think it was, I'll say 100 hotels, and only 1 hotel refused to deny service to the Asian family. Then they sent them a survey in the mail and said, would you deny service to Asians? And I forget the number, but it was, I don't know, maybe half or even more said, no, I wouldn't serve an Asian. So just the dichotomy of actually being in person versus just the theoretical, or on the internet, just, behind this mask of anonymity, where you can in some ways be a completely different, alienating person.
I think that's an excellent point. I also read that study, and I was blown away by that. And I think that is what we're getting at. We need to see each other as humans that embody the same challenges, hopes, and dreams as we do, and as our friends and family do. And then once you're able to see the other side as that, like Roger was saying, it makes the opportunity for dialogue real. Before then, you can continue to oversimplify and say, you are a this because you said that, and I don't care what comes out of your mouth now.
Right. And that happens a lot.
And that's dangerous.
Roger, people who are watching, we have some folks who are watching from New York. We have people all around the country, and hopefully one day you'll be able to spread out and do that. But how can they get involved if they want to come to a dinner?
The easiest way is probably send us an email.
Yep, www.experimentid.org. We have an email. You can contact us. Right now, we're doing word of mouth for our dinners, but everyone who reaches out to us, I will personally respond to, and I'm happy to invite them.
There's a challenge for y'all right here. We'll make sure that we put that that website on Bold.Global and on our Facebook page, and someone will put it in the comments section right now, won't they?
Yes, they will. They will link to their website.
There they go. Laura Messing, Roger Sachar, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
It's a
It's a great experiment.
We're not the only ones trying.
We're not the only ones experimenting in
Yes,
dialogue.
yeah, well, it's sometimes it works a lot. Doesn't always work. Roger and Laura, make sure you're listening to our next segment because I think you'll really appreciate it. It's talking about taking it to the next level, not just experimenting in dialogue, but experimenting in relationships in general. Dr. Chloe Carmichael is back with us. She's a regular guest. I like your hair now.
Oh, thank
a little
you.
lighter, looks very good.
And this is for our bookstore segment.
Yeah, it is.
Yes?
Thank you. I always forget to do that.
Yes.
This is but it's also one of Carrie's like media bias and how she's just such in a horrible position as a conservative in New York. And inter-party dating are Carrie's two topics, totally two topics. And so, Dr. Carmichael, you've written a book that it's a guidebook to how to do it, how to date someone from the other end of the ideological
Well, the book is
spectrum?
more, it's the 10 Commandments of Dating, Dr. Chloe's 10 Commandments of Dating. So since you are the lawgiver to us, we want to know specifically on our
Lawgiver.
politics show. What?
What is that word? I got to Google it. What is that word?
She's creating the laws here, the 10 Commandments.
Oh.
It's a biblical phrase.
Okay.
Mr. 2 Corinthians. So, Dr. Chloe, you first of all, tell us a little bit about the book, and then secondly, how can we apply your principles to this concept of dating someone who doesn't think like you?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me back. It's always good to be with you. So the 10 Commandments of Dating book is something that I've seen because in my practice in New York, of course, there's just everyone is trying to find the right person. But in today's dating world, a lot of our old protocol and things like that for dating are just out the window. So I found that clients were just looking for kind of a guidebook of how do I actually go about dating now in a way that's going to help me find a partner. And of course, I would be happy to talk about how to apply some of those 10 Commandments of dating to people who might be dating across the aisle.
So Carrie can't find a conservative man in the city of New York, so that's why she keeps asking. We won't ask you to list all 10 because people need to go and buy the book, but what do you think would be the most important commandment in a situation where you just are not people who agree on certain topics?
Sure, there are so many great ones that I think could be applicable here. One I'll talk about is rule number 9, control your mind. And so with rule number 9, control your mind, what it means in the book is to be careful that you're not daydreaming too much about your crush, because your mind can actually start to feel as if you've spent all this time with that person, and then you feel a little over dependent on somebody before you even maybe had, date number 2 or 3 with them. But the way that that applies to politics is if we find out that somebody voted differently than we did, our mind jumps to all kinds of stereotypes about that person that may or may not even be true. And we're spinning this whole story in our mind that may or may not even be true. So I really want to encourage people to actually talk to the person and say, oh, well, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Why did you vote that way? Or why do you feel this way about the issue?
A lot of people just immediately, though, put a block up. If you feel this way, it's what our last guests were talking about, is that people will turn it off immediately.
Yeah, if you look on Bumble, there are guys who say, no Trump voters. And I'm sure there are a lot of women that haven't
you didn't vote for
voters.
Trump, so
no,
you're
I didn't. But at the same time, I would never put that.
It's easier said than done to
profile.
control one's mind, though. So I mean, these I'm assuming these commandments all are easier said than done. So are there practices that people can put forth
Absolutely.
to try to actually do that?
Of course, yes. So I want to share some examples, okay, of how that could work. So for example, it's important to have the same values as the person that you're dating. We can all agree on that. But what people don't realize is that you can have different values, or you can have the same values, but have different ways of implementing them. So for example, we could both be against racism, but you could feel like the best way to bring that to fruition is to get rid of affirmative action. And somebody else could say, well, I'm against racism, and that's why I passionately advocate for affirmative action. I would like to see those two people be able to say, well, we actually have the same value. We both are against racism. We just have different ways of trying to bring that forward. So that's, one way that you could control your mind is to try to find the common values that you actually do share, even if you have different implementations.
I like that.
It is the challenge, though.
No, but so maybe in this scenario, you could say, okay, well, we will agree to disagree about specifically affirmative action. However, let's find a creative way where we both agree we could express ways to prevent racism.
We both hate Hitler.
Yes.
There you go. Just start at a basic level.
Yeah.
We both hate Hitler. Now let's work from there. But it sounds like these folks need to go to one of these dinners, though, because that's sort of the problem in politics, society in general, is getting one side to agree or concede that the other side, while I completely vehemently disagree with how you want to do it, does love the country and is doing the things that, because I think a lot of people are just conflicted about what someone's motivation is. And I think a lot of people on the left believe that the Republicans are motivated by another thing than we are. So when do you know that it's just not going to work?
When is it beyond the pale? Yeah, that's a great point. So I would say that if you can't bring it down to some kind of common value, and again, we have to remember that there's a lot of wiggle room there. So you could be really pro-welfare because you feel like it helps the poor. Somebody else could be really anti-welfare because they feel like it ultimately disempowers the poor. But those two people actually have the same value of wanting to support poor people to gain jobs and autonomy. So again, I would say that it's beyond the pale if after your best efforts of both of you really trying to see what is the common value that we share, if you actually really don't share the common value, then it's probably not the best partner. But I think we often have more in common than we think.
Okay, well then I don't know. We're gonna have to go in a second, but like the big question for me though is, if these are exercises I would say would work really well and be important about the politics stuff. If you were in a longer term relationship and you'd been with someone for a while, is there an argument at all that if you have to work this hard at the very beginning to try to find some sort of common ground on date 1 or 2, that is there a point where it becomes too much work to really even, let's not deal with this? I mean, is that a part of an issue?
Well, for some people, yes. But if we can try to, again, remember that I think the way it becomes not fun is if you think, oh my gosh, I'm actually sitting here potentially dating Hitler. But if you can remember...
We'll all agree not to do that at the very
least. But if you're able to find out that we actually have some common values and we're just looking at maybe a slightly different way of getting there, then sparring can actually be pretty sexy. Many clients find it kind of exciting to have a little bit of an argument. And
I think I'm gay, Carrie. Because it gets heated out here. Well, Dr. Chloe Carmichael, thank you so much. You can make sure you find her book, Dr. Chloe's 10 Commandments of Dating.
Which is available at Ask Dr. CC, askdrcc.com.
Oh, excellent. We'll put that in the comments also. We always love having you here. Thank you very much. We'll see you again next time Carrie needs some help dating a Democrat.
I actually have an idea.
Oh Lord. Oh gosh, are we going out in the field?
All right.
Okay.
We'll talk.
Bring it back. We'll back for that. Okay. We're going to go out in the field. We're going to take you on. We're going to set cameras up at a speed dating session for you. Oh my God, that's next week's episode.
Speed dating with cross-political aisle affiliation.
And
you too, Clay.
No,
we'll find you a nice Trump red stater.
I appreciate being by myself.
Overalls,
listen. I'm not interested in it. Okay, give it up. That's your third mission, by the way.
That was one of my New Year's resolutions.
To try to find to do something that is not wanted at all.
If you have any ideas, let me know.
Or not.
Any.
Or not. Let's get off of that horse. I tell you what is exciting that people can stick around for.
Yes.
The very first episode of Bold Life today at noon, right here, same place. So tell us real quickly about what people can expect on Bold Life.
So Bold Life is with our gorgeous host, Miss Kirsten Haglund. She was Miss America 2008, and she's going to lead us through how to live our boldest life possible. So you got a little time right now. Go get some coffee, maybe go grab a bite. Come back here at 12 o'clock noon Eastern time. You don't want to miss Kirsten. Kirsten's been on the show. She's filled in for me here. You're going to love her. We're also working with Bustle.com and Good Housekeeping and the Independent Women's Forum. So we're going to have a regular segment called Bold Women, Bold Soul, Bold Travel, Bold Health. You don't want to.
It'll be a good place, and Bold Dating probably eventually. It'll be a good place for this speed dating piece for Carrie on Bold Life.
Yes.
So tune into that at noon today and noon every Friday. We'll be back here next Friday at 10 and Tuesday at 9. You can catch Bold Business. Our friend Morgan Ortegas will be there.
Yep, and David Grasso.
And David Grasso. So thanks so much for joining us. I'll see you next week. Kirsten will see you at noon.
See you noon.